What's up, everybody? I'm John Middlekauff. You know what I need you to do. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We got content for days reacting to every NFL game all the time, every single day. Subscribe, like the videos. Let's go. What is going on, everybody? How are we doing? Hopefully everyone is having a great day, a great morning, a great afternoon, wherever you may be. And today we're going to talk some football. I just recorded a bunch of stuff with Colin, so I will try to talk about things we didn't touch on. I do want to reiterate a theory I have when it comes to the Cleveland Browns, Jimmy Haslam, and Shedeur Sanders. The prank call, I have a couple thoughts on that. Belichick interview, which, if you haven't seen Belichick's interview on CBS Good Morning on Sunday, it's quite the ride with his new lady friend, Jordan. And then a couple other football things here and there from the draft. So we will have content all week reacting to the draft, stories, as it all kind of marinates, and we'll just keep talking about it. We'll probably have a big mailbag on Tuesday. At John Middlekauff is the Instagram. Fire in those DMs. Get your questions answered here on the show. But before we dive in to a little football, I got to tell you about my friends, my partners in the official ticketing app of this podcast, Game Time. And here's the thing. I just had a bunch of friends who went to Stagecoach. It's kind of the country music version of Coachella down there in the desert in California. Indio, I think they call it. Palm Springs area. Had a lot of fun, and they did it. They even saved them a little money, all because of me. I got you covered, guys. And if you want to go to a game, listen, do you live in Southern California? If you're a Laker fan, you guys might only have one more game. Do you want to see Luka and LeBron play? Who knows? Maybe this is LeBron's last year on the Lakers. Maybe they move on. Only time will tell. But if you want to go see an NBA playoff game, and they're fantastic. I mean, the difference of the NBA playoffs and the regular season reminds me of preseason to regular season football. I'll watch the Knicks Detroit today. Just thrilling action. So if you want to go to one of these games, obviously hockey playoffs are off and running. They're fantastic. Do it with my friends. The best ticketing app I've ever used. Take the guesswork out of buying them with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use the code JOHN for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem the code JOHN for $20 off. Download the Game Time app today. Last minute tickets, lowest prices guaranteed. Okay, there's a lot going on. And I didn't do anything on Saturday. Partly I just needed a breather. Mel Kiper was fuming. I'm pro Mel Kiper, but I do think he was clearly, I don't know why he was so angry. And, Louis Riddick and Reese Davis, and they were going back and forth, and it was like, God, you got to be exhausted. I was exhausted from the story. I needed to take 24 hours off. So me and Colin touched on it. I've had some time to think about it. And I'm going to rehash a theory that I just told Coward. So if you already heard it, sorry. And if you haven't, this is my theory. Because I don't think it's that complicated. Because it doesn't make much sense to take multiple quarterbacks in a draft. Especially in the third and the fifth round. That's unheard of. You go back to RG3 and Cousins. It was because Kyle Shanahan and Mike Shanahan did not want RG3. Kyle Shanahan was trying to convince them to trade back and take Cousins early. He's talked about this. This was a situation where I think I just read something that the Cleveland Browns had flown out, and it never got out, and met with Jimmy Haslam, with the coach, with the GM, with Dillon Gabriel. They liked him a lot. Now, I don't even necessarily agree with their assessment. I think drafting Dillon Gabriel in the third round is a little rich for my taste. Right? It's like paying $1 million for a $700,000 home. Now, value in the eye of the beholder on draft day, we can argue that till we're blue in the face. I don't think he was going in the third round. I actually feel pretty confident. Now, you could always make the argument, how do you know? I've been doing this long enough. Pretty good idea. There's a reason the Will Howards, the Riley Leonards, the Quinn Ewers, you didn't need to take those guys in the third or fourth round. You knew they were going to be there in the sixth or seventh. I do think Dillon Gabriel, at the latest, I think he could have got him in the fifth, but whatever. My thought is this. As Shedeur Sanders starts to drop, when you work with someone long enough, it's like when you're growing up and you live with your mom, your dad, your brothers, you really know them well, right? You know what sets them off. You know what buttons to push to piss them off. you know when it's like, okay, I got to be, especially if you have an older brother or an older sister, like, okay, I'm gonna avoid this issue. I know my dad really values this, even though my mom doesn't care, and so you just kind of work the room a little bit, right? Definitely, if you've been in a company and you've worked with someone, you've worked for someone, you get a pretty good feel for their demands, what they're into, what if they are an overbearing boss, what they will force you to do, and you kind of know how to play them a little bit. I don't mean like nefariously, but just like to settle everything down. Once Shedeur Sanders starts dropping, Andrew Berry and Stefanski aren't done. They know that Jimmy Haslam is going to be interested. Why? Because Jimmy Haslam has forced several quarterbacks on them that they did not want. And they clearly in this draft wanted Dillon Gabriel. So once he starts plummeting, they go, maybe text to each other, maybe talk in their office, close the door. Like, maybe we should draft this guy a little bit higher than ideally we want to. So we just get a quarterback in our draft class, and then Shedeur will go some picks later, and we don't have to force this upon us. Because Shedeur Sanders, when I think Kevin Stefanski, I don't think an ideal fit. I actually think Shadeur's playing style is a lot like Deshaun Watson. Now, I think Deshaun was a better college player and a better prospect than Shedeur, but I think there are some similarities. Well, in Kevin Stefanski's offense, and this is the Kyle Shanahan thing, they don't really into freelancing, right? They're into do exactly what I tell you. We can argue till we're blue in the face. That's how they want to play. It's why they like guys like Kirk Cousins and Brock Purdy and Joe Flacco and Dillon Gabriel. He will get rid of the ball quick and go exactly where you want to go with him. Now, can you see that guy? He's kind of short. We'll find out. But I think they did that to hopefully, like, okay, this will shut the owner up. The problem is that Shedeur kept dropping. So it's like, well, he didn't know one picked him in the fourth. And then he's still there in the fifth. Now it gets to a spot where the owner tells you, we're taking him. And when you watch the reaction of those guys in the draft room, and I know they push back against this, bullshit. That you could see in Stefanski's eyes, he wanted no part of that. Andrew Berry did not want to make that pick. And then when they discussed it in the press conference, it was clear like this was not their doing. And we have a long enough history to now know this owner forces them to do things they don't want to do. I think Andrew Berry and I think Kevin Stefanski are good at their job. Now, I don't have to agree with their quarterback evaluation because I think Shedeur Sanders is a better NFL prospect than Dillon Gabriel. They clearly did not. And it makes no sense to take a guy in the third and then another in the fifth because Michael Lombardi used to talk about this for a long time. That NFL practices are math equations. You don't get an unlimited amount of plays. This isn't basketball where it's like, well, just run it again. Eventually, you can only run so many plays with your players, especially now because of the rules. So in a practice, and I'm just going to pick some even numbers to make things even. Let's say during a team period, we will have 30 reps of ones versus ones, twos versus twos, threes versus threes. Well, we don't spread those equally, right? I give more reps to my better players, especially once the pads come on in training camp. So when I got pads on, my ones, and I've been to a lot of practices, and every coach does it a little bit differently, get 70% of the reps. Then the twos come in and get the next 20% of the reps. And then the threes get, let's say, 10 to 5% of the reps. Now, it might change on a given day, but it is disproportionately weighted to starters, backups, and threes. And the thing is, like, at tight end, if I'm George Kittle, I'm like, hey, coach, I need a blow. I'm exhausted. It's like, hey, take the next 10 plays off. So the ones, the twos, and the threes, he just sits on the sideline. And the other tight ends rotate with the ones, rotate with the twos, rotates with the threes. I can do that at wide receiver. I can do that at running back. I can do that at all the other skill positions, right? I cannot do that at quarterback. Quarterbacks aren't coming in and out. They stay with the unit. Now, with the threes, you can rotate the threes, or you can rotate a guy with the twos, I guess. But like if you are the twos quarterback, you get those reps. It's why you see when there's a competition for the backup job, they usually rotate them through training camp. But over time, like one guy ends up getting more reps. What you would have given going into training camp, obviously Joe Flacco is going to get the ones. And just based on his experience, and I don't think this guy's any good, he's going to start with the twos. That's going to be Kenny Pickett. So you're going to have two guys rotating with the threes. You're just not going to get that many plays. So it doesn't make any sense. I've seen a lot of people try to justify it. It's like, just keep throwing darts at the dartboard. And I agree. With most positions, it is just very difficult to take multiple quarterbacks in a draft and get a feel for either one throughout practices. So you can't convince me, and other people have written about this in The Athletic, that this wasn't the owner. And anytime the owner, I'm all for the owner having opinions. It's his team. But when he's forcing you to take players, and this feels like this is out of Shedeur's control, but I just think it's a weird spot. And the other thing, and I mentioned this to Colin, is coaches and front office people sometimes disagree, right? I like a player that you don't like, or vice versa. And sometimes we just agree to disagree and we take the player. And if the coach doesn't like the player that the front office drafted, he can manipulate how many reps that guy gets at practice, how much energy and effort I put into them, right? Especially when you're talking mid to late round picks. And if the coaching staff, if the head coach, especially if the front office as well, is not on board, they will not care. Because part of, and this is the cool part about like being Jalen Milroe. Listen, I thought he was a pretty big wild card, pretty risky pick. But here's what I know. John Schneider and Mike McDonald, all in on him. Think about Mike, was around Lamar for years. Think about what made John Schneider a legend. He pounded the table for Russell Wilson. So those guys believe in mobile quarterbacks. You know, Russell was a better thrower than Lamar right away, just in terms of accuracy. Lamar obviously became a much better player over the course of the last 4 or 5 years. But when people support you, and this is no different than any industry, when you work at a place where the guy that hired you or the guy that runs the company believes in you, wants you there, it's much easier to succeed. As a player, just like as any normal employee, you can start sensing, like, do these guys even want me here? How often have we heard over the years, older veteran guys, just players throughout the history of the league, to be like, yeah, I was at a place, the coach and the GM didn't like me. But they just didn't want me there. And I knew it was destined to fail early on. Happens all the time. Will continue to happen, and it's happened historically in the league. So I think this is just a very clunky, weird, bizarre spot. And while in theory I get like, oh, just throw darts at a dartboard, accumulate as many players as you can. Well, yeah, it's easy to rotate slot corners in and out. It's easy like, oh, this slot receiver gets these reps. It's not really how quarterback works. You kind of got to get a cohesion with the unit you're repping with. So it's just very bizarre situation there. The NBA 82-game grind is done. And now the real fun begins. The NBA playoffs are here, and it's time for the high-stakes drama, clutch moments, and jaw-dropping plays. Can't wait. If you're looking to make the playoffs even more exciting, DraftKings Sportsbook has you covered as an official sports betting partner of the NBA. From the play-in games all the way through the finals. Now, the time to back your favorite players and teams as they chase glory. All season long, DraftKings has been your go-to spot for NBA player props. And that doesn't stop now. Want to make your playoff experience even more intense? Try placing a bet on your favorite player's performance. Will Curry drop 30? Will LeBron drop 40? Or more? It's your call. Ready to place your first bet? Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now, lock in your bets, and let's make the playoff run unforgettable. Here's something special for first-timers. New DraftKings customers bet $5 to get $200 in bonus bets instantly. Make it a playoff run to remember with DraftKings. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use the code JOHN. That's code JOHN for new customers to get $200 in bonus bets when you bet just $5. Only on DraftKings. The crown is yours. The prank call situation is something that's gone pretty viral. Embarrassing look for the kid who, stuck his tail between his legs with his apology, posts something, calls them. Bad look for Jeff Ulbrich. I also think some of the reaction, like Jeff Ulbrich should be suspended. It's like, I don't even necessarily believe the Atlanta Falcons. Of course, this was the Atlanta Falcons. Like, of course, this stink is on Atlanta. What just a poorly run operation. But like it was his child, and I've been a college kid and done dumb things. My senior year in college, 2000, the fall of 2007. I don't really talk about this ever because I was a business intern for the Kansas City Chiefs. So from basically middle to late August till the middle of December, I moved to Kansas City. My dad had like a friend that he went to college with who knew a guy whose kid had rented us a room for like 300 bucks. Lived in Overland, Kansas, and worked for the Chiefs. And I worked in sales. So I tried to help the guy sell you know, sell things in the stadium in terms of signage. Just tried to do a bunch of stuff in sales. It's not what I wanted to do, but it was the only way I get into the NFL. I had mailed at the time. It was hard to get emails in '07, so I had mailed like every team in the NFL and a lot of college teams asking if they had any sort of internship in football, and I still have them in my closet. A bunch of people emailed you or mailed me back the Giants, the Packers, the Bears. These like generic, like thanks for your interest. We got nothing. And the Chiefs were the one team that were like, yeah, you can come work for us. I was like, I'm going to work in the NFL. It was an unpaid uh, job in sales in a cubicle with like 50 other interns. But I also utilized that time to meet people on Herm Edwards' staff. And early on in the season, before they really started to suck, I would go up a couple nights during the week and try to help him out with like miscellaneous bullshit. Basically, his like head of, I guess he would have been like the head of football administration or something. He interviewed me to Herm. He was cool. He kind of got my really the ball rolling of what I aspired to do after that. And they used to have these booklets and basically it had every number of every human in the NFL because cell phones, while they existed in '07, most people in any industry in your office had a hard line. And if I wanted to get a hold of the CEO of Microsoft or Jerry Jones, he had a number directly to his office that was separate of a cell phone. And this booklet had every number in the league, from GMs to coaches to owners. Obviously, all the famous people, not players or anything, but everyone that had an office in the league. Well, when I went back to Cal Poly, because I still had spring and I guess winter and spring, we were on the quarter system. I went back and lived with my buddies. Still had a couple quarters of just I basically was had like one class remaining. I was partying, hanging, doing nothing, doing whatever I wanted to. And I think one late night, I bust out the book. We probably had a few too many, and I was like, "You guys want to call Belichick?" Again, this I forget that I actually had forgotten about this until my buddy Trent had told me a couple years ago about this situation. And I'm pretty sure two guys, and again, this could have been Pacific Standard Time, midnight on like a Saturday. So people wouldn't even have been in the office. We definitely called Belichick and Jerry Jones. And you would get like, especially, whatever the number was, extension 219 or extension 17. And it'd be like, this Jerry Jones office or this Belichick. it was incredible. We were all laughing on stuff. So I think, listen, kids do dumb shit. Now, I didn't get anyone on the horn. I don't even think we hung up, when it would go like beep, we just hang up. But everyone, the overreaction, is it stupid? 100%. Is it a kid being a fucking asshole? Yes. From what I've saw, Shedeur was not the only guy that this happened to countless players. So was it all these guys? Somehow they got hacked. I have never heard of someone's kid getting access to numbers and then wearing these guys out. But I do understand a situation where if you give a 21-year-old who's 15 Coors Lights at the time, they were like natty lights deep, it's like, hey, I got Belichick's number. You might call it and say something stupid. The other thing is Belichick, the video or the interview he did today with CBS Morning News. First I saw it as Portnoy had recorded it and said, this is the most bizarre, awkward interview I've ever seen. And then it goes completely viral of him and his young girlfriend, who basically is acting as his PR manager, who's chiming in. It's really, really uncomfortable. And part of being a college head coach, which is a lot different than an NFL head coach, even with the NIL and buying players, there is still an element of selling yourself. In the NFL, I don't need to sell shit. I sell by what I pay you and do you want to win or lose? And that is historically how it's operated. In college, it's changed, but like the reason Saban and Kirby and Ohio State and Michigan always got the best players all my life, just because you couldn't pay guys above the table, you can still pay guys below the table. You still have to recruit their parents, the players. Stuff still matters. And your personality, like look at the top head coaches in college football, have big personalities. And it matters sitting in living rooms. And I'm watching Belichick thinking, like, this is a little bizarre. And I don't know how good North Carolina is going to be this year. No clue. Know nothing about their roster beside they just signed this kid from South Alabama who was like a mobile dual threat quarterback, which feels a little bit weird, but we'll see how that operates in Belichick's offense, which I'm not even quite sure what is, but we'll find out what it is pretty quickly. I just watched that video and I thought to myself of like, Belichick's never working in the NFL again. I don't think anyone's hiring this guy. And I think the situation with his girlfriend, like most owners in the NFL have probably seven girlfriends. No one judges you. Robert Kraft's wife died and he had like a 30-year-old on his arm the next day. So it's like it's not like the NFL is some moral police when it comes to the age gap of who you're allowed to date. Nobody cares. But it's one thing when you hear about it, and it's another thing to see it in that environment. And Belichick gave this interview like he had just lost to the Kansas City Chiefs and they're on to Cincinnati. And it's like, I don't know if you can really act like that in these settings, in the position you're now in, with this girl on the side who I don't blame her. She's, she can say whatever she wants. Would she be dating this 73-year-old if he was a plumber? Of course not. It helps when you go, this guy's worth probably 100 plus $1 million. Let's call a spade a spade. And look, there's nothing wrong with that. It's her prerogative. She can bang whoever she wants to. But when you see that version on CBS, you're like, this is rough, man. This is rough. This is rough for your current job. And I'm a Belichick fan. I think he's the best coach I've ever seen. And some of the stuff that people crush him for, none of it matters in the pros. It's a very black and white league. You win or you lose. You win or do you lose? Nothing else really matters. Belichick had a guy who murdered someone down the road from his house. It's like, yeah, we'll cut him, we'll move on, we'll win three more Super Bowls. That's the NFL for you in a nutshell. The Baltimore Ravens, I've talked about this over and over, like as polarizing as Shedeur, he honestly overshadowed some of these red flag guys that were drafted in the first and second round. Major red flag guys. No one, if the guy gets 10 sacks, no one will give a shit. Beside a couple big J's on Twitter that no one will listen to. And like the reason the Ravens, think about this. The Ravens drafted a kicker in the sixth round. They have no clue if Tucker is Deshaun Watson 2.0. The reason Deshaun Watson was so, I would say, bizarre and such a toxic situation is like, bro, were you addicted to this? Was this an addiction for you? That's weird, especially when you're like a good looking quarterback who's really rich, right? And the Tucker thing feels like it's in a similar vein. But the reason they drafted a kicker, and more than likely Justin Tucker won't be on their team this year, is because he can't kick anymore. His career is winding down. He's not good. If he was still wildly considered one of the greatest kickers of all time in the prime of his career, they would overlook it. It's why Belichick, all those years, it was like doing some weird shit when he comes out of that Nantucket house with his shirt off, probably not sleeping with a 50-year-old. Don't blame him there either. Like, he's got options, right? Everyone's like, well, he's Bill Belichick, 6 rings. You start struggling, people like when you're a sales guy and you're the number one sales guy in your company, you can do whatever you want. They're probably not going to get rid of you. Miss your quotas 4 quarters in a row. See how that goes. And I just think sometimes people get on their high horse about stuff in football. It's like if they think you can play, you're going to be on the squad. If they don't think you can play, you won't be. Or they'll overlook you. And the argument that we've had for a long time, which I do think is like kind of jump the shark about the conferences and the where the best players are. And we argued forever about the who should be in the playoffs. And I understand just because you have a lot of guys drafted doesn't mean you're a great team. But it's pretty clear watching Ole Miss, right, or Alabama, that even in years where they underachieve, they're way better than SMU. And looking back at the college football playoff, when everyone argued SMU deserves it, how many guys did SMU just have drafted? The SEC, again, for, I don't know, the 100th year in a row, had more players than any conference drafted. If you combined the ACC and the Big 12, they don't even equal the SEC. And they only eclipse the Big 10 by a couple players. I feel stronger and stronger about this take and thought by the day, definitely by the year. This is only going to continue to consolidate. And I'm not pro like what has happened to college football. I did not want the Pac 12 to disappear. I was not rooting for that. I loved the Pac 12. I wish it still existed. I loved watching Oregon State try to upset USC. I loved watching Washington State try to take down Kalen DeBoer when he had a loaded team. That was cool. Those days are over. Those programs are now essentially D1 AA. Fresno State got my start in football. It'll be D1 AA or D2 here really quick. These programs that aren't not only Power 4, we're headed to the Power 2. That's where we're going. Miami, Florida State, North Carolina, they already want out of the ACC. So the lucrative programs in the third best conference want out. They don't want it to exist. And listen, I respect the Big 12 in terms of basketball. At football, it's a terrible conference. It really it is much closer. The Big 12, and I'm not some shit talker. I loved Arizona and Arizona State when they were in the Pac 12. But watching those two programs, especially Arizona State this year, play in the Big 12, it's just not a very good football conference. They lost their two best programs, Texas and Oklahoma. The Big 12 is closer to the Mountain West than it is to the Big 10 or the SEC. Honestly, I don't even think it's that close. So, like the argument, and this is where college football is going to become pretty fascinating. A lot of people have wondered, Quinn Ewers. Did Quinn Ewers make a mistake? It was obvious when he chose to come out in the NFL that he could have made more money staying in college. He knew that when he made the decision. Because we all knew it. It's like, Quinn, you're not going to go in the first 2 days of the draft. And we know the going rate when we see Carson Beck making a couple $1 million, like you can still make millions of dollars. Now, I could also understand being a 21-year-old kid, like I don't want to go to class anymore. I don't want to stay on campus. I don't want people to view me like Tyler Shuck. I'm just here for the long haul. I do think, though, you'll look back. If the NFL career does not go well, it is hard in the real world. Really, really difficult. Very difficult to make millions of dollars. And if you're out of the NFL, like a lot of players are, in under 3 years, the amount of money that you will accumulate, especially if you only play on the couple practice squads and then you barely even get a year and you're out of the league, you will never be able to recoup that money. Now, maybe you go on to a successful career, but it's more than likely going to take you some time to build up your career to even make big time money for a decade, 2 decades. Like it's going to take a while. And I think it's going to be a conversation moving forward. Like Carson Beck went to Miami. He was in the same situation. He easily could have come out. He would have been drafted just like all these other guys in the 6th, 7th round. Instead, he's like, I'm going to cash in. I think it's crazy. Like, I wouldn't give millions of dollars to Carson Beck or Quinn Ewers, but I'm not running these programs. And these programs are proving they will do it. Now, I also think this argument, like, that's out there on the internet that guys, if they don't get drafted where they want to go, should be able to come back to college. Like, no, I don't agree with that. But maybe we should lengthen the time. I'd have no problem with going up to like free, like you're allowed to go to the combine and through basically free agency to start a free agency March 15th. That's the date. And you're able to test the waters. You know, the NBA has done this for a long time. Go to the combine. And if you want to back up, I even think the NFL and college has tried to institute that, but I think more guys should utilize that. And if you want to stay, hey, this is going right now. I do think it's a little complicated with the transfer portal and everything, but that's a lot of money to pass up. It really is. But I also understand as someone, I could count on 2 hands the things I've learned in class, in college. Not even. I don't think I learned anything in a classroom in college. Not one thing. And college really benefited my life. Everything I learned was outside of the classroom. Meeting new people, trying to date women that I didn't grow up with, like uh, doing stuff for professionally when you know nobody, trying to kind of forge your path. Like everything I learned in my 4 years and a couple quarters at Cal Poly was outside of a classroom. So I understand these guys going, this is stupid. I agree with you. Unless you're going to become a doctor or an engineer, most things you're going to learn in this classroom will not benefit you as you age professionally at all. But like I know people that are just ready for the next challenge and ready for the next thing. And I can imagine it's easier for me at 40 years old to value money and understand like and be able to look at things from a 20,000 foot view than it is for a young guy who's just been making. I bet Quinn Ewers has made millions of dollars the last couple of years. So he goes, I'll just make more. And he'll look back maybe in 5 years of like, God, I should have just transferred to A&M. I'm just picking random schools, but he clearly would have had options. And it's going to be fascinating to watch how this plays out. Like, if these guys, and part of it is this, Shedeur made a lot of money in branding because he was a really famous college player. Same with Quinn Ewers, really famous college player. That brand changes dramatically if you're not good in the NFL. No one cares. I've always hated athletes that try to start brands that basically are just copying like Michael Jordan or Tiger Woods or some of these guys. Like the biggest brands in my life when it comes to athletes are based on guys who are fucking legends, champions, the greatest players of all time. I mean, the greatest athlete brand, not even close, is Michael Jordan. Also known for one of the greatest champions in the history of society. I don't even know what TB12 is, but when you say TB12, everyone knows it. Why? Because he's got 7 Super Bowls. Tiger Woods literally changed the way business professionals wore collared shirts to work and changed an entire industry, the polo industry, because he was winning majors every single year. Part of your brand has to be greatness, right? Patrick, you can build a brand and brands behind Patrick Mahomes. Why? He wins nonstop. The NBA is full of these guys whose brand, like, what are you doing? This ain't going to work. And usually it doesn't. Now, I'm not saying like, I kind of, I feel like you're just being a hater. Just talking reality. And I think these guys are going to look back like, did I make a mistake? Now, Shedeur, I'm sure thought, even if he fell, was going to be a second round pick. Everyone, every single human knew that Quinn Ewers was not going to get drafted very high. Honestly, I'm a little surprised he got drafted at all. He could have stayed, chose not to. And I wonder if he's going to be used as an example moving forward. The difference, basically they came to a fork in the road. Him and Carson Beck. They were in 2 separate cars driving right next to each other. Carson Beck went, I'm going to cash in, cha-ching. Quinn Ewers said, I can never look at another professor. Who even knows if he was going to class? I've talked to some of you young guys. Half your classes are online. I would have died for an online class when I was in college. He's like, I'm going pro. And then you get drafted late and you only make $100,000, which is incredible for 99.9% of 20, 21, 22 year olds. But when you've been used to making millions of dollars, it has to be like, damn, did I make the right decision?